You've never touched another human being, not once, not a hand, not a kiss, not even the ground beneath your feet. Your entire life has been spent hovering, ever so slightly, above everything you think you've touched. No matter how tightly you grip something, how hard you press, or how deeply you hold someone, the atoms in your body and the atoms in the world have never actually made contact. It feels impossible, insulting even. You remember holding your mother's hand when you were small. You remember the feel of rain against your skin. You remember being pulled from sleep by the warmth of someone else's body. But none of those moments involved physical contact. Not truly. You were close, so close the space between atoms blurred. But in the world of fundamental particles, even closeness is a lie. Your brain doesn't know that, of course, it's convinced. And why wouldn't it be? When you touch a wall or a lover's face, your skin sends signals to your nervous system. Pressure, heat, texture. But these aren't the results of atoms colliding. They're the results of repulsion, a gentle war of charges, electromagnetic forces screaming at each other across quantum gaps. What you feel isn't contact, it's the denial of it. At the atomic level, matter doesn't behave the way you expect. There's no smooth surface, no friction between solid layers. There are only clouds, electron probability fields that surround every nucleus like a fog. When your hand moves toward a table, the atoms in your fingertips never actually land. Instead, their outermost electrons are repelled by the electrons in the table. Not because they're rude or stubborn or afraid, but because the universe has rules, and one of those rules is that no two electrons with identical spins can occupy the same quantum state. It's called the Pauli exclusion principle, and it's the reason your atoms don't fall into themselves, the reason your body doesn't collapse like a dying star, the reason you still have a shape at all. But this law, like so many in physics, comes with a side effect. It creates the illusion of solidity, the illusion of touch. What we call contact is nothing more than a dance of resistance, a negotiation of boundaries that are never actually crossed. You're a collection of particles suspended in space, your body held together by fields and probabilities. And when you think you're touching something, when you feel the heat of a flame or the pulse of someone's heartbeat, it's only because your atoms are refusing to overlap. This resistance creates electrical signals. Your nerves light up. Your brain processes them. And in that electrical storm, it manufactures a sensation, the sensation of touch. But it's a lie, a necessary lie, one that lets you navigate a world made of things you'll never truly reach. Even now, your body is floating above the chair you think you're sitting in. Your feet hover above the floor. Your fingertips rest on a cushion of force fields. You are not in contact with the world. You are in proximity to it. And this is not a glitch. This is how reality works. Everything you know, every physical experience you've ever had, has been filtered through this deception. When you clench your fist, you're not bringing matter into alignment. You're arranging fields. When you hold someone you love, your bodies are close enough for your atoms to scream at each other, but they never embrace. And yet, the feeling is real. The irony is almost cruel. The most intimate moments of your life, the ones that made you feel connected, grounded, whole, they were constructed out of rejection. The illusion of contact is born from the refusal of particles to overlap, from distance, not unity. We are beings built on boundaries, not just physical ones, but atomic ones. And in that resistance, we've found warmth, comfort, meaning, but it's all just motion and math, probability and pressure. Every hug, every handshake, every kiss, a frictionless standoff, a carefully orchestrated electromagnetic ballet, performed at the edge of true interaction. You don't touch anything, you never have. The space between your atoms and everything else is filled with no, with pushback, with limits. But what if those limits are the point? What if it's in the separation, however small, that we find the possibility of experience, of sensation, of self? You've never touched anything in your life, and yet the world has touched you deeply, profoundly, in ways atoms can't explain. And maybe, just maybe, That's enough. Scale, but infinite in terms of physical contact. The gap between your atoms and the world is always greater than zero. There is no equation in physics that allows you to bridge it, and your brain has never noticed. This is the great trick of consciousness. It creates the illusion of certainty. You assume that what you feel is truth. That sensation is a direct link to the outside world. But what if it's all a translation? What if your brain is building a dream out of invisible collisions, chemical signatures, and electric feedback? You don't feel the world. You feel your model of the world. When you run your fingers along rough wood or smooth glass, the texture you experience doesn't exist in the object. It exists in the data, electromagnetic feedback patterns, edge detection, micro vibrations reported by your skin and synthesized into something understandable. There is no wood in your nerves, no glass, only frequencies and forces. And your brain, desperate for simplicity, says, this is rough, this is smooth, this is hot, this is pain. But pain is not contact, heat is not merging, texture is not interlocking. You are a ghost, passing your hand through a field of other ghosts and calling it solidity. Touch, as we know it, is a hallucination grounded in utility. But there's something deeper here. Because if all of our senses are simulations built on raw data and repackaged as experience, then where does the simulation end? You see with light bouncing off surfaces, but your eyes only receive frequencies and intensities. Your brain colors them, shapes them, invents space and depth and motion. You hear with waves of pressure, but your ears only translate vibration into electrical signals. The sound itself? That happens inside your head. Taste, smell, balance, all of it is a neural approximation. But touch feels different, because touch is the only sense we think of as contact, the only one we believe proves the world is real. If you can hold it, it must exist. And yet, here lies the irony. Touch is the least real of them all, because touch implies merging, atoms meeting atoms. And that never happens. The sense that grounds us most firmly in physicality is built entirely on rejection. You are not a body moving through a world of objects. You are a cloud of probabilities being constantly repelled by every other cloud. A dance of denial translated into sensation. And the most remarkable part? You never knew. For your entire life, you've walked the world confident in the reality of contact. You've used it to anchor yourself, to connect, to love. But not once, not for a second, have your atoms ever truly touched the atoms of anything else. And yet you've felt so much. So what exactly is your brain doing? It's lying, yes, but maybe it's also protecting you. Because the truth is hard, cold, empty, and sometimes an illusion is the only way to survive it. Everything you've ever seen, held, walked on, or broken apart feels solid. Tables, walls, stones, bones, the ground you stand on and the body you live in. It all seems dense, stable, impenetrable. But the closer you look, the more that illusion unravels. Atoms, the so-called building blocks of matter, are not blocks at all. They're not tiny marbles arranged like Lego bricks to form the structure of reality. They're mostly nothing. A nucleus of protons and neutrons surrounded by a cloud of electrons. That's the entire picture. A speck of mass floating in a haze of uncertainty. If you were to take a single atom and blow it up until the nucleus was the size of a grain of rice, the nearest electron would be several football fields away. And in between, nothing, just empty space. That's not metaphor. That's not exaggeration. That's physics. The atom, like everything it builds, including you, is mostly vacuum, a structure held together not by matter, but by force. The atom is an architectural miracle of emptiness and electricity, a shape with no substance, a presence made of absence. And yet billions of these hollow entities assemble to form hands, hearts, planets, oceans. Somehow, when enough emptiness arranges itself just right, it feels like mass. It feels like resistance. It feels like reality. But it isn't. Your body is made of atoms, which means your body is made of space. The resistance you feel when you press against something isn't two solid things meeting. It's two invisible barriers refusing to collapse into each other. We call this barrier an electron shell, but that's misleading. There's no shell, there's no surface. There isn't even a definite edge. There is only a cloud, a haze of probability, describing where an electron might be found. And that cloud is what defines the size of the atom. Not because it has substance, but because it has influence. Because it pushes back against other clouds. That pushback is all you'll ever feel. You might imagine that if you could somehow shrink yourself small enough, get between the electrons, you'd find something solid at the center. But you won't. Because the nucleus itself, the so-called heart of the atom, is also empty. It's not a smooth core. It's a chaotic swarm of quarks and gluons, particles held together by the strongest known force in the universe, one that's still not fully understood. Zoom in far enough, and even those particles seem to dissolve into something stranger. Vibrations, fields, points of potential. The deeper you go, the less there is. Reality isn't solid. It's structured, organized emptiness animated by laws and fields we can't see. And yet, your senses insist otherwise. They tell you the world has substance. texture, hardness. They tell you a rock is firm, that a brick will stop you, that your body has weight and boundaries. But none of those things are intrinsic to matter. They are the results of interactions. Mass, for example, doesn't come from the amount of stuff something contains. It comes from how that stuff interacts with the Higgs field, an invisible energy that fills all of space. Without the Higgs field, there would be no mass. Without mass, no resistance, no weight, no friction, no pressure, no touch. Everything you feel, the textures of the world, the solidity of objects, is an emergent property. It arises not from substance, but from relationships. You don't push against a thing. You push against the forces that define the boundaries of that thing. You resist not the object itself, but the fields it projects outward. You don't feel atoms. You feel what they refuse to become. So what does this mean? It means that the entire sensory picture of the world is a trick of scale. At the macroscopic level, trillions upon trillions of tiny, vibrating, mostly empty atoms behave in a way that simulates solidity. But solidity doesn't exist. Not down here. Not at the level of truth. There is no hard in the quantum world. No smooth surface. No edges to run your fingers along. There is only motion, interaction, blur. You never truly hold anything. You never truly grasp. What you call holding is a collection of invisible forces pushing back just enough to tell your brain, this is something. But it was never a thing. It was only the illusion of one. This illusion is comforting. It gives us the idea that we live in a tangible world made of tangible things. But if we were honest with ourselves, we'd admit we're building castles out of shadows. Objects aren't things. They're relationships between emptiness. And you? You're no different. Your body feels like a boundary, a location, a volume of self surrounded by the outside world. But zoom in, and that boundary dissolves. Your cells are built from atoms. Those atoms from particles. Those particles from fields. There is no border, just space arranged by forces you can't see. You are not solid. You are not static. You are a vibration, a cloud, a form of resonance. And so is everything you've ever touched. Solidity is a myth we tell ourselves to make sense of resistance. But the universe resists us not because it is solid, but because it is structured. Structured to repel, to separate, to push back. You exist in a world of force fields, invisible scaffolding, a dance of charges and empty shells that never meet. And your senses, fallible, brilliant, limited, translate all of it into the story of touch. But that story isn't true. It's necessary, it's beautiful, but it isn't true. The truth is emptier than you ever imagined, and somehow far more full. If you've ever wondered why your body doesn't sink into your chair, or why you don't fall through the floor, or why your atoms don't collapse into each other like a dying star, the answer comes down to one strange, absolute rule. It's not a wall, or a barrier, or a force in the traditional sense. It's more like a prohibition, a cosmic law with no enforcer, just obedience. It's called the Pauli exclusion principle. This principle is one of the core rules of quantum mechanics, and it states simply that two identical particles, like electrons, with the same quantum state, cannot occupy the same place at the same time. There's no negotiation, no exception. It is a fundamental law of matter, baked into the code of the universe. If electrons didn't obey this rule, matter would collapse. Everything you know would compress into a single, undifferentiated clump of sameness. The difference between one thing and another would disappear. There would be no chemistry, no atoms, no you. But because electrons are forbidden from sharing the same state, they're forced into a kind of eternal spacing game. They spread out, they orbit in different shells, they resist overlap with everything around them. This resistance isn't caused by shoving or bouncing. It's not a force you can see. It's a consequence of identity. Two indistinguishable electrons cannot share the same coordinates, not because they don't want to, but because the universe simply won't allow it. When your hand hovers above a surface and you press down, what you're really doing is bringing your electrons dangerously close to the electrons in that surface. And the Pauli exclusion principle screams no. It raises a quantum wall. It forces your particles to remain separate, always. This is one of the reasons you never touch anything. The very structure of reality is designed to prevent contact. The moment two identical particles approach the same state, they are forced apart, not by pressure, not by heat, but by the architecture of possibility itself. But there's more to this repulsion than just identity. Electrons also carry a negative electric charge, and as any child learns playing with magnets, like charges repel. This electromagnetic repulsion is incredibly strong at close range, stronger than gravity by a factor of 10,000 trillion. That's not just a big number. It's the difference between atoms forming planets and atoms collapsing into one another like falling dominoes. Every time you press your hand against a wall, what you're really doing is entering a kind of standoff. Your electrons push against the wall's electrons, and the wall pushes back, not because it's solid, but because the electromagnetic forces woven into both of you refuse to allow overlap. What you feel as pressure is the buildup of these forces resisting proximity. Your skin is a warning system, calibrated to measure the gradient of electromagnetic rejection. You don't feel contact, you feel denial. And here's the strangest part. You're not just being kept out of other things. You're being kept out of yourself. Your own atoms obey the same rules. The electrons in your body repel each other too. Your skin doesn't collapse inward. Your bones don't melt into your organs. You are a structure held together not by touch, but by limits. Every atom in your body is hovering in a tiny, stable shell of loneliness. Never merging, never touching, only orbiting in harmony with everything else. Even when two atoms form a bond, a chemical bond, they don't really touch. They share electrons. But sharing is not contact, it's coordination. mechanical. Your brain receives them without context. It doesn't see the object. It doesn't feel the texture. It receives a storm of electric static, and from that static, it builds the illusion of touch. The brain is not a mirror. It doesn't reflect the world. It reconstructs it. It takes input, filters it through memory, through expectation, through experience, and delivers back a version of reality that feels stable, coherent, useful, but it's not real. It's a story. And like all stories, it begins with imagination. Your brain doesn't wait to perceive, it predicts. Before your fingers finish pressing against a surface, your brain has already guessed what you'll feel. It pulls from past encounters, familiar materials, weight, texture, pressure. It fills in the blanks long before the sensory data arrives. Then, like a magician, it merges prediction and input into a single sensation. And you believe it, because you have to. If your brain waited for perfect data, you'd be frozen, hesitant, vulnerable. Instead, it chooses speed. It chooses certainty over truth. So what you experience as touch is not a measurement, it's an inference. A neurological hallucination fine-tuned by evolution to keep you alive. You don't feel the object. You feel your brain's model of the object. A guess, an echo. That model is vivid, convincing. When you run your fingers along stone or lace or skin, the sensation feels immediate, tangible, but it isn't. It's been processed, flattened, reassembled, and delivered back to you as a seamless experience. This is why phantom limbs can itch, why you can feel pain in an arm that's no longer there, why a feather can feel like fire and fire like nothing at all. Because your brain is not reporting reality. It is generating sensation from inside itself. The nerves are messengers, but they're not in charge. They're biased, noisy, imperfect. They relay electrical data that can be overridden, reinterpreted, misread, and the brain does override it constantly. It does it when you feel your phone buzz, but it didn't. It does it when you think someone tapped you on the shoulder, but no one's there. It does it when a single gentle touch can make you shiver, or flinch, or cry. You don't feel atoms. You don't feel electrons. You feel what your brain decides those interactions should mean. You feel memory, anticipation, context. You feel stories, because the brain doesn't process in isolation. It processes in relationship, to emotion, to meaning, to history. The same pressure on your hand can feel safe, threatening, comforting, or unbearable depending on who applies it. The sensation is the same, but the experience changes. And here's the most important part. Your brain never leaves the skull. It never directly touches the world. It is sealed in darkness. It has never seen light, never heard a sound, never felt warmth or wind or water. It only knows electrical impulses. Everything else is fantasy. Touch, sight, sound. They're all simulations built from patterns of electrical firing. So when we say, "You've never touched anything," it's not just physical. It's perceptual. You've never truly known the outside world. You've only known your brain's version of it. That version is useful, it's coherent, but it is not real. It is a user interface, like the icons on your computer screen. You click the folder icon, not because it looks like a real folder, but because it works. It triggers an action. It hides the complexity beneath. The world your brain shows you is exactly that. An interface, simplified, symbolic, constructed from shortcuts. And the most powerful shortcut of all is touch. Because touch feels honest, primitive, unfiltered, as if it must be real because it's physical. But that's the trick. Touch is no more direct than vision or sound. It's built on the same filters, the same interpretations. You think of it as the rawest sense, but it is every bit as manipulated as the rest. And sometimes it gets it wrong. Your brain can be fooled by pressure illusions, by temperature confusion, by prosthetics and rubber hand tricks. You can feel what isn't there, not because the nerves lied, but because your brain did. And it always does, not out of malice, but out of necessity. Reality in its raw form is incomprehensible, a chaos of frequencies, forces and fields, a storm of invisible interaction. The brain can't handle that, so it edits, compresses, renders the universe into something you can walk through. And what you feel when you touch contact. It only requires recognition, two people existing close enough in space and time for their inner experiences to align, even momentarily. Your body doesn't need to touch another to feel what they feel. It only needs to believe it has. That belief, the illusion of contact, triggers a flood of response. Hormones, memories, emotional states woven into the pattern of sensation. The moment becomes real, not because atoms collided, but because consciousness responded. And maybe that's more beautiful than the truth we thought we knew. Because if all the most meaningful moments of your life didn't require actual contact, then maybe we've been measuring connection the wrong way all along. Maybe the beauty of those moments is that they happened despite the distance, despite the physics, despite the fact that you are, and always have been, a field of particles suspended just above everything else. The miracle isn't that you touched someone. The miracle is that you felt something so deeply, even though your body never let you cross the line. That something intangible, a memory, a love, a goodbye, was carved into your mind from a moment that never technically happened. And if that's true, then what are we? What are we if our deepest feelings come from illusions? What are we if we can cry over a phantom, grieve over something that never truly made contact? Maybe we are the stories atoms tell when they try to understand separation. Maybe everything we've built, language, family, music, memory, is our attempt to translate distance into connection. Because the truth is, the universe is lonely. It keeps everything apart, even things that belong together. It forces every particle into solitude. It builds worlds out of repulsion and emptiness. And somehow in that emptiness we've found each other. We've made meaning out of spaces that never close. We've fallen in love without ever truly touching. We've said goodbye with nothing but air between us. And maybe that's the greatest defiance of all. That in a universe designed to keep everything apart, we still found ways to feel close. You'll never touch your child. Not in the way you once believed. But the memory of their hand in yours will live in you forever. You'll never touch your partner, or your parents, or your friends. But the warmth you felt, that moment you knew something real had passed between you, that was no less sacred. You didn't need contact to feel love. You never have. Maybe the fact that atoms refuse to touch is what makes connection possible at all. Maybe closeness only matters because we never quite reach each other. And maybe that's enough. Touch depends on position. That's what we've always believed, that if two things are close enough in space, they'll meet. That location is simple, X, Y, Z, that if something is here, then it is not there. That contact, however rare, at least has a theoretical path. But in the quantum world, even that path dissolves. Because in the world of subatomic particles, the very idea of location begins to blur. Atoms aren't tiny spheres sitting neatly in space. Electrons don't orbit like planets. They exist as waves, smears of probability, fields of maybe. A particle is not where it is, it's where it might be. Until we measure it, we don't know its position. And not because we lack the tools, but because position, as a property, does not exist until observation forces it to collapse into something definite. This is quantum indeterminacy. It's not philosophical, it's not metaphor, it's the foundation of how the universe operates. When we talk about electrons inside atoms, we don't describe their paths, we describe their orbitals, mathematical regions where the electron is likely to be found. These orbitals aren't hard shells or fixed routes, they're clouds, soft boundaries defined not by where something is, but by where it might suddenly appear. An electron isn't circling the nucleus like a moon, it's everywhere at once within a probability field, until you look. Then it picks a location, not because it was there all along, but because your observation forced it to choose. It's like asking a shadow where it lives. So what happens to the idea of touch in this world? What does contact mean between two entities that don't even know their own position? How can two particles touch when neither has a definite location? When you bring your hand toward a surface, what's actually happening at the quantum level is a negotiation of probabilities. Your atoms, their atoms, each a blur of potentiality. Their wave functions interact, interfere, repel, fields ripple, forces respond. But no two particles ever become one. No two positions are confirmed until measurement collapses the wave function. And that collapse doesn't reveal a deeper truth, it creates it. Before measurement, there is only uncertainty, only potential. So the contact you feel, the sharp edge of a countertop, the heat from a sun-warmed rock, is the result of a trillion simultaneous quantum decisions. Tiny blips of collapsed wave functions, resolved just enough to give your nerves something to report. But underneath it, chaos, not violent, not loud, but fundamentally ambiguous. Touch isn't just rare, it's undefined. It exists on a map that doesn't show the terrain, only where the terrain might be. And yet, the illusion is persistent. Your brain receives enough certainty, enough force, enough repulsion to build a coherent picture. But coherence isn't truth, it's strategy. And the strategy is simple. Ignore the indeterminate and simulate the definite. Because if we actually experience the quantum reality of our own atoms, we'd fall apart. Not physically, but perceptually. The self requires anchors, stable references, edges, borders. Without them, we dissolve into vagueness. We lose the illusion of form. But physics offers no such luxury. In its eyes, your atoms are ghosts, flickering blurs, unnamed vibrations pulsing in and out of potential. They exist as wave functions, mathematical constructs that collapse not when they reach a surface, but when we dare to look. And that observation doesn't just reveal the world, it creates it. You're made of particles that never truly decide to be until they are watched. And the things you believe you touch are no different. So what happens when two wave functions approach each other? Do they touch? Number. They interfere. They entangle. They coexist in possibility space. They can influence one another, repel one another, shift one another's probabilities. But they don't meet. There's no clink, no snap, no moment of definitive union. There is only a shift in likelihoods. And then, sometimes, a collapse. And even then, the collapse is local, temporary. It doesn't bring reality into sharp focus. It only gives you a sliver, a slice. Enough to build a narrative, enough to keep you sane. You believe the world is made of hard things in hard places, that a chair has a location, that your hand has a trajectory, that when the two intersect, a moment of truth occurs, contact. But truth in this case is a house of cards, built on probability, maintained by ignorance, and propped up by a nervous system desperate to believe in solidity. Because the alternative is unbearable. The alternative is that every moment of interaction is a guessing game. That matter itself is a cloud of maybe. That everything we call real is composed of things we can't even describe without destroying their possibilities. You've never touched anything in your life. Not because your atoms were blocked, not because the fields pushed you back, but because nothing ever had a position to touch in the first place. It was always a wave, a blur, a lie. And somehow, that lie was enough to build a universe. We like to think of the world as made of walls and windows. Things are either solid or permeable. You can pass through air but not steel. You can push your hand into water but not through a wall. Boundaries define what's real. They separate space, objects, identities. But in the quantum world, boundaries don't hold. Because down there, beneath the level of sight and certainty, particles don't play by the rules of solidity. They don't bounce off barriers. Sometimes they go through them. This is quantum tunneling. It's one of the most unsettling phenomena in modern physics. And yet, it's not rare. It happens all the time. It happens inside the sun, inside your body, inside the circuits powering the device you're watching this on. And it should be impossible. Imagine a ball rolling toward a hill. If the ball doesn't have enough energy to climb the hill, it rolls back down. Simple, logical. That's classical physics. Now shrink that ball to the size of an electron. Give it less energy than the hill it's approaching. Classical physics says it should bounce off, end of story. But it doesn't. In the quantum world, the ball doesn't stop. It doesn't roll back. It disappears on one side of the barrier and reappears on the other. Not over it, not through it. Simply skipped. No warning, no visible mechanism. Just gone, and then there. This is tunneling. A particle manifesting in a place it should never have been able to reach. A clean violation of everything we thought defined physical limits. But it's not a violation of quantum rules. It's baked into them. Because particles at their core are waves of probability. When a wave reaches a barrier, it doesn't stop immediately. It tapers off. It extends through the barrier, a mathematical whisper saying, I might still be there. And in rare cases, that whisper becomes real. The particle's wave function collapses on the far side of the wall, as if it had passed through something impenetrable. But there was no passing. No squeezing through a gap. Just existence before and existence after. It's like watching a ghost walk through a locked door. Only this ghost is you, or at least the particles that make up you. Tunneling is the reason nuclear fusion works inside the sun. The protons don't have enough energy to overcome their mutual repulsion. By all accounts, they should never get close enough to fuse, but they do. because sometimes quantum mechanics gives them a way around the wall. This isn't a rare trick, it's essential. Without tunneling, stars wouldn't burn, atoms wouldn't form, life as we know it would be impossible. And if that doesn't unsettle you, consider this. Tunneling isn't just limited to protons in stars, it happens inside your own body. In the DNA of every living cell, tunneling plays a role in mutation. Protons can tunnel across the hydrogen bonds in DNA, changing its structure. Sometimes the result is harmless, sometimes it leads to disease, sometimes it creates an entirely new trait. Quantum tunneling may be responsible for evolution itself. The next great leap in life could begin with a particle ignoring the rules and appearing somewhere it shouldn't. But what does this have to do with touch? Everything. Because tunneling proves that boundaries aren't real, that the walls we assume are absolute, the divisions between one object and another, one space and another, can be bypassed, not with force, but with uncertainty. If particles can simply vanish from one side of a surface and reappear on the other, then what is a surface? What is a wall? What is a body? If your particles can tunnel through barriers, then the concept of inside and outside becomes meaningless. If matter can flicker into forbidden spaces, then no boundary is safe. No containment is guaranteed. No object is ever truly separate from the space around it. We believe in separation because we experience resistance. We believe in contact because we experience pressure. But tunneling erases the need for either. It says, you can exist in a place you never pass through. And if that's true, then touch doesn't just fail to happen, it becomes irrelevant. Because how can you speak of two things meeting when the very idea of a path from one side to the other is broken? Your body, right now, is surrounded by surfaces you think you're not inside of. Walls, air, furniture. But your particles are not fully bound. They are governed by probabilities, and those probabilities leak. Right now, there is a non-zero chance that part of you has tunneled somewhere else, that a particle in your arm exists momentarily on the other side of the room. It's unlikely, ridiculously so, but not zero. And the universe, it seems, runs on the unlikely. Tunneling reminds us that matter is not static, that identity is not absolute, that containment is not secure. Even the skin you live in is porous at the level of probability. So when you reach out to touch something, what are you really doing? You're interacting with a surface that may not even be there. You're pushing against a boundary that, at its core, is optional. You're hoping that your atoms behave predictably long enough for your brain to register a sensation, and they usually do. But occasionally, they don't. Occasionally, a piece of you chooses another path, disappears, reappears, not through motion, but through possibility. Touch, then, isn't just repulsion. It's a negotiation with chaos, a momentary agreement between two clouds of probability that, just for a second, they'll pretend to be solid. And even that agreement is fragile, illusory. Because in the quiet mathematics beneath reality, every particle is already elsewhere, already gone, already halfway through the wall. You've never touched anything. But perhaps even more unsettling, nothing has ever truly touched you. Not the world, not another person, not even your own body. Because the illusion doesn't stop at the skin. It doesn't end at the edge of your fingers or your spine. It goes deeper, beneath your organs, your cells, your atoms. You've collapsing into one another. You feel like a single thing, but you are not a thing. You are an arrangement, a pattern, a kind of order that holds for now. You don't exist within your body, you exist because of it. Because of the rules it obeys. Because of the distances it maintains. And when those distances break down, when cells merge that shouldn't, when forces collapse, when the exclusions fail, your body stops being you. It becomes something else, something unrecognizable, cancer, infection, death. These aren't just medical states. They are failures of form, breakdowns of the illusion of separation. But until that moment comes, the structure holds. And you, as a mind, as an identity, ride the edge of that structure. A ghost woven from probabilities and chemical resistance. A consciousness stitched together by fields that never quite touch. You are not your hand. You are not your skin. You are the sensation of being near yourself. When you clench your fist, you are activating signals. When you rest your head, you are interpreting feedback. When you feel your own chest rise and fall, you are measuring motion, not contact. Not one atom inside you ever brushes another. So how do you hold together? Force, field, code. Everything you are is managed by relationships, not collisions. By boundaries that aren't built from contact, but from rejection. And those relationships are delicate. Every few days, your stomach lining replaces itself. Every few weeks, your skin regenerates. Every few months, your skeleton cycles out the minerals in your bones. You are constantly being replaced, not all at once, but gradually, particle by particle, pattern by pattern, and still, somehow, you remain you. That should be impossible. But it isn't. Because you were never the atoms to begin with. You were always the form they took, the distance they maintained, the dance they performed. You are a phantom of boundaries, a consciousness born from a choreography of things that never meet. So when we say you've never touched anything in your life, we don't just mean the world. We mean yourself. You've never held your own heart, never touched your own brain, never felt the atoms that make you, not even once. They are strangers to each other, to you. And still somehow they cooperate. Still somehow they agree to play their parts, to maintain their roles, to pretend they are touching long enough to let you believe you are whole. You were taught that you are a body, a thing with edges, a shape, that your skin marks the boundary between you and everything else, that your brain is your command center, that your thoughts arise from inside that tissue like steam from a boiling pot. But what if that's not true? What if the self isn't a place? What if it's not even a thing? We've already seen that your atoms don't touch, that the cells in your body never collide, that your own structure is built on resistance, not embrace. The particles that make up your form aren't locked together. They orbit, repel, adjust, balance, and they're changing all the time. You've been dying and regenerating since the day you were born, and yet you feel continuous, consistent. You still feel like you. But continuity is not substance, it's memory, it's momentum. It's the illusion that because the pattern survives, the person does too. You are not a static object. You are a process, a flickering awareness sustained by 1 trillion silent negotiations between particles that refuse to touch. A phenomenon of coordination. A song the universe is singing in one specific shape for one specific moment. You are not matter. You are arrangement. And that arrangement is astonishingly fragile. Change the pattern even slightly, deprive the brain of oxygen for a few minutes, damage a tiny part of the neural web, and the self begins to fade. Not the body, not the mass, but the thing behind the eyes, the voice you hear in your head, the narrative you call me. It slips. So what is that voice? It's not located anywhere. You can scan every inch of the brain and never find a center. There is no throne, no spotlight, no ghost in the machine, just processes, signals, loops of cause and effect lighting up across a soft field of bioelectric jelly. The self, as far as we can tell, is a simulation. one designed to model the body, not from the outside but from within. The brain constructs a central character to act out its inputs, a user interface, an avatar. But that avatar has no mass, no weight. It's not an object you can locate or remove. It exists as a story your brain tells itself to explain the experience of continuity. And stories don't need atoms to collide. They only need perspective, sequence, interpretation. Yourself, the thing you think of as the real you, isn't touching anything. It can't, because it isn't made of particles. It's made that closeness should be absolute, that to truly know someone or something, we must somehow become one with it. But the universe doesn't work that way. It doesn't collapse things into sameness. It holds them just apart. A sunbeam never touches the earth. A planet never touches its star. The moon pulls at our oceans without laying a finger on them. And yet tides rise, plants grow, hearts change, because power doesn't come from contact. It comes from interaction across distance. The moon moves the sea not by embracing it, but by tugging at it invisibly. The sun warms your skin not by brushing it, but by sending light that dances just outside your atoms. The gravity that holds galaxies together is not a rope, it's a relationship, a conversation across empty space, and you are no different. The love you feel when you hold someone is not in the atoms, it's in the arrangement, in the electric conversation between nerves, in the heat shared between two fields, both pulling back just enough to keep the illusion alive. You've never touched the people you love. But you've known them more deeply than any particle ever could, because knowing isn't about merging, it's about witnessing, about standing close enough to see without erasing, to feel without possessing, to remain distinct but connected. That's what the universe is built on. It is a tapestry of relationships, a field of tensions, a story of things almost touching, but never collapsing into each other. And in that space, thin, trembling, impossible, everything happens. You exist because the universe holds its pieces apart. If electrons could collapse into the nucleus, atoms would implode. If protons and neutrons could occupy the same state, the periodic table would vanish. If gravity didn't maintain its delicate distances, the stars would fall into chaos. Life depends on space. Love depends on space. Consciousness depends on space. If your neurons all fired at once, if your mind had no separation between one thought and the next, there would be no identity, no progression, no you. It is the gap between notes that gives music its rhythm. It is the pause between words that gives language its meaning. It is the space between people that gives love its ache and its beauty. Touch was never about fusion. It was always about recognition. When you place your hand on someone else's, what matters is not that your atoms repel. What matters is that for a moment you were present. You reached. You offered your field to theirs. You said without words, "I am here, and so are you." That is contact, not physical, but emotional, energetic, human. And the beauty is this: the space between us makes it possible. If you and I were the same thing, we could never recognize each other. If our atoms collapsed, if our identities blurred, if we became one, we would be gone. There would be no you, no me, no spark between us. Separation creates the spark. Distance generates meaning. Even longing, so often seen as pain, is a sign that we're alive, that we yearn across the space, that we feel the tension of what might be, what could be, what was almost within reach. And maybe that's the deepest truth of all, that the ache of not quite touching is what makes life sacred. The first time you fell in love, you didn't need to merge with someone to feel them. You just needed to stand in their orbit, to feel the gravitational pull of their presence, to notice how your thoughts shifted when they entered the room, how your body behaved in response to theirs. That was enough. That was more than enough. You were never meant to collapse into each other. You were meant to resonate, to hold your pattern while feeling the presence of another pattern, so close, so parallel, so perfectly out of reach. That's not a failure, that's art, that's music, that's life. We are all constellations burning alone in space, visible only because we shine across distance. Our beauty isn't in contact, it's in proximity, in alignment, in the fleeting, fragile chance that two things so far apart could still move in harmony. You've never touched anything in your life. But look what you've done with the space between. You've built memories, relationships, wonder, empathy. You've stood on one side of the void and chosen, again and again, to reach across it. And in that reaching, you became real. You've never touched anything in your life. But now that sentence feels different. The first time you heard it, it sounded like a theft, a cruel revelation, as if something sacred had been taken from you, as if the closeness you once trusted was a lie. And maybe it was. But now you know the truth goes deeper. The absence of touch was never a mistake. It was the design, the very condition of existence. Because if everything merged, nothing could emerge. If everything touched, nothing could remember. You need the distance to be a self, to think, to choose, to love. You've never touched anything in your life. And because of that, you've touched everything that matters. You've held hands you never truly contacted. You've kissed lips that never merged with your own. You've pulled people close, so close you thought your atoms must have blurred, and yet you stayed just apart, always. And in that space, something unspeakably human happened. The illusion of contact, the reality of connection. There's a kind of grace in that, one the physical world could never offer. Because what you're feeling in every moment of closeness is not friction or fusion or atomic alignment. You're feeling meaning, presence. You're feeling what it's like to be. And maybe that's the whole point. We spend our lives aching for closeness. We seek it in touch, in conversation, in memory. But what we're really looking for is witness, to be seen, to be known, to be recognized even briefly as something separate, and yet worth reaching for. You are a pattern of atoms held apart by force and chance. But you are also a story, a lived sequence of experience strung across a scaffold of space and silence. A life told in the language of almost touching. Everything you've ever felt, every heartbreak, every joy, every breathless second of awe came from this illusion. And that makes the illusion divine. Because here's the paradox: the lie gave rise to the truth. The refusal of particles to touch created beings who could hold each other. The emptiness between atoms became the possibility for art, for kindness, for understanding. The same forces that kept you from falling through the earth also let you dance on it. You never touched the first person you loved. But when they smiled at you, something real happened. You never touched your child. But when they placed their tiny hand in yours, the universe bent around that moment. Not because atoms collided, but because you were there. And now you know that presence, true presence, isn't about fusion. It's about attention. It's about the impossible miracle that something separate could care. This isn't a tragedy. It's a triumph. The universe could have been nothing, a static field, a dead equation. Instead, it became this: a place where distance makes longing possible, where longing makes meaning inevitable, and where meaning turns separation into beauty. And so here you are, sitting, watching, listening to a voice that technically has never touched your ears, just digital signals, vibrations in the air, pressure waves interpreted by nerves, rendered by your brain. And yet, you heard me, you felt something, not because we touched, but because we didn't. Because there's a gap between us, and that gap is what lets this moment exist. That is the final truth. You've never touched anything in your life, but because of that, you have touched wonder. You have touched memory. You have touched grief, laughter, longing, connection. You have touched everything that matters. So don't be afraid of the space. It's not empty. It's where you live. It's where we live. It's where meaning is born. And if someday everything you know dissolves, if the atoms lose their balance, the form breaks down, the mind fades, remember this: you were real, not because you were solid, but because for a while you held shape. Because for a while you stood just far enough apart from the world to see it, to love it, to wonder. You never touched anything. And that is why it mattered so much when you tried. You may walk away from this wondering what changes, knowing now that your hand never held another, that your lips never kissed, that your fingers never brushed the world they thought they knew. What are you supposed to do with that? But the truth is, everything changes, because once you understand the space between things, not just as a physical reality, but as the very condition of meaning, you begin to move differently. You begin to live with awareness, with reverence, with the knowledge that closeness is rarer than we ever imagined. You start to see the world not as something to grip, but something to witness. The trees you pass are not just rooted matter. They are forces suspended in form, refusing collapse, just like you. The breath you take is not contact with the air, but interaction, a blending of fields, a negotiation of proximity. And the people you love, they are not something to hold, they are something to behold. Because even if your atoms never merge with theirs, your moments do, your choices, your attention, your willingness to reach across the gap and say, I see you there, still separate, still distinct, and still worth everything. That is the miracle, that we are apart and still try. We build civilizations on this refusal to touch. We build art and science and myth. We build empathy. We imagine what it's like to be another. And even though we will never fully inhabit someone else, we spend our lives trying to get closer. And sometimes we do, not through atoms, but through alignment. When two people, Two arrangements of particles floating in their own protective shells face each other, hear each other, understand each other. Something passes between them. Not a thing, not a force, but a moment. That moment isn't recorded in molecules. It doesn't leave a mark, but you feel it anyway. Because that's what meaning is. It's what happens when consciousness finds a way to stretch beyond its own edges. Not every species gets this gift. To know that you're a part, to know that you can never truly touch, and to choose to reach anyway. The universe is ancient, violent, empty, but somehow you were born with the ability to long, to imagine what it would be like to cross the gap, to touch what cannot be touched. And in that longing, you found something infinitely more important than contact. You found care. Because when you know you can't truly hold something, you treasure it more. You treat it gently, you look longer, you listen harder. You don't assume it's yours. You know it's always separate and always at risk of vanishing. That awareness makes the moment sacred. It's the space between things that allows them to move, to breathe, to be distinct, and it's the space between people that allows them to be loved. So the next time someone reaches for your hand, remember what's really happening. Not atoms colliding, but attention crossing space. Not contact, but connection. Not fusion, but something braver. Two people, two worlds, stretching toward each other in the knowledge that they'll never truly meet, but still believing the reaching is worth it. And it is, because in that space, unreachable, invisible, untouchable, something lives. Call it meaning, call it mystery. Call it the reason the universe bothered to make anything at all. Whatever you call it, just know this. It's real, more real than mass, more persistent than pressure, more important than anything that can be measured. You will never touch the stars, but you can still let them guide you. You will never touch the past, but you can still carry it. You will never touch another soul, but you can still make them feel less alone. And maybe, in the end, that's the most important thing you could ever do. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the cosmos here on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us each Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.